All right, let's talk about something that is absolutely essential for any programmer today: how to handle JSON data inside Python. You know, it's kind of like the secret language that lets all our favorite apps and websites talk to each other behind the scenes. And if you've ever wondered how that magic really happens, well, you've come to the right place. So here's our game plan. First, we'll dig into the why, the big data sharing problem that started it all. Then we'll meet our hero, JSON, the universal translator. After that, we get our hands dirty. We'll see how to get data out of Python into JSON and then how to bring it right back in. And we'll wrap it all up with a super simple cheat sheet for the only 4 functions you'll ever really need. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. We're living in this digital world where everything needs to talk to everything else. You've got different apps, written in totally different languages, built by different teams, and they all have to communicate. So how on earth do they do that without it all turning into a garbled mess? I mean, really think about it for a second. Your Python server needs to send data to a web browser that thinks in JavaScript. A mobile app needs to pull info from a database that has its own way of doing things. They can't just send their internal data structures back and forth. It wouldn't work. They need a common ground, a neutral language that everyone agrees on and understands perfectly. And that is exactly where JSON steps in. It is the perfect, elegant solution to this whole mess. Think of it like a universal translator from Star Trek, just for data. It's the go-between that lets all these different systems have a fluent, error-free conversation. So what is this stuff really? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and its superpowers are pretty simple. First, it's incredibly lightweight, which just means it's super fast to send across the internet. Second, it's just plain text. That's the secret sauce. Because it's just text, literally any programming language can read it. And finally, and this is a big one, it's human readable. You and I can just look at it and instantly get what's going on. Now, if you're a Python person, this is going to look incredibly familiar. On the left, a standard Python dictionary. On the right, the same thing in JSON. They're almost identical, right? But here's the one tiny detail you have to get right. In JSON, the keys, so name and age here, they must be in double quotes. Not single quotes, double quotes. It's a strict rule, and it's what keeps JSON consistent no matter what language is using it. And this table really shows you how clean that translation is. A Python dict becomes a JSON object. A list or a tuple becomes an array. Simple enough. But pay attention to those little details. Python's true, with a capital T, becomes a lowercase true in JSON, and Python's special value none becomes null. It's this simple, predictable conversion that makes the whole system work so well. All right, enough theory. Let's make this real. How do we actually take our Python objects, our dictionaries and lists, and turn them into this universal JSON format? In technical terms, this is called serialization, but in the Python world, you'll hear people talk about dumping the data. So let's imagine the most common scenario. You've got some data living in your Python code, and you need to bundle it up into one neat package, a string of JSON text, so you can fire it off to a web API or some other service. To do that, Python's JSON module gives us this beautiful, simple function, json.dumps. And here is the single most important thing to remember. See that S at the end of dumps? That S stands for string. This function takes your Python object and turns it into a JSON string. Simple as that. But what if you're not sending data across the internet? What if you just want to save your Python data to a file for later? This is super common for stuff like configuration files or just saving the state of your program. For that, we use a slightly different function, JSON dump without the S. See what's missing? There's no S at the end, and that's your clue. This function doesn't make a string. It takes your Python object and writes it directly into a file object, creating a perfect JSON file right on your hard drive. Okay, so we've successfully sent our data out into the world. Now we gotta flip the script. How do we take that universal JSON text and bring it back into our Python program as a useful living object? This is called deserialization, or in Python terms, loading the data. So let's go back to that web API. It sends a response back to us, but that response is just a raw string of text. It's up to us to parse that string and turn it back into a Python dictionary that we can actually use. And the function for that is json.loads. And look, the S is back, which tells you exactly what it does. It loads from a string. You give it the JSON text, and poof, out comes a native Python dictionary ready for you to work with. And now for the final piece of the puzzle. What about that config file we saved earlier?
How do we open it up and load its contents back into our program as a Python object?
You probably guessed it. For this, we use JSON.load. Just like its partner, dump, there's no S. That tells us it works directly with a file object. This one function does it all. Opens the file, reads it, parses the JSON, and hands you back a nice, clean Python dictionary. And that's it. We've just covered the 4 horsemen of Python's JSON module. It might feel like you're juggling dump versus dumps and load versus loads, but it all boils down to one incredibly simple pattern. Let's put it all together on one screen. Okay, here it is, the whole thing on one slide. If you remember one thing today, make it this. Just look for the S's. If the function has an S in the name, dumps or loads, it works with a string. If it doesn't have an S, dump or load, it works with a file. Then you just have to remember that dump means out of Python and load means into Python. That's the entire mental model you need. It's that simple. And really, that's all there is to it. By understanding these 4 simple functions, you've basically learned the universal language of data on the modern web. You now have the key to talk to pretty much any API, service, or configuration file out there. So the only real question left is, now that you can speak JSON, what data are you going to go unlock?